Ukrainian forces are advancing in the south and achieving significant successes in the east. Ukrainian forces continue their offensive in the Zaporizhia region and are achieving partial success there. In addition, the armed forces of Ukraine are conducting attacks against the invaders in the Luhansk region. Andriy Kovalev, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, continues to lead offensive operations in the directions of Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Mariupol. Mariupol, located in southeastern Ukraine, was recently struck by a powerful explosion, making it one of the most heavily bombarded cities since the beginning of the war. Reports suggest that senior officers of the Russian armed forces were eliminated in Mariupol as a result of the attack. There is a high probability that the attack was carried out using Storm Shadow missiles. Peter Andreaschenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, confirmed the information, citing the partisan movement Mariupol Opposition. He stated that the Russian army was targeted in a private house in the Primorsky district, not far from the port. Following the explosion, ambulances and fire trucks were seen circling the city, but details of the incident are still unknown. Based on the footage from the scene, it appears that the house was destroyed and the debris subsequently burned. It has also been reported that the invaders in Mariupol were preparing for an offensive against the Ukrainian armed forces. The proximity of Mariupol to Russia's illegally annexed Crimea, along with its strategic and economic importance, has drawn attention. As one of the largest cities in the Donetsk region, Mariupol houses the largest and most equipped port on the Sea of Azov, providing crucial shipping opportunities. The city has been heavily targeted by the Russian army and has endured significant damage. Recently, Ukrainian forces successfully launched an attack on the Russian positions, resulting in the elimination of 2 more Russian generals on the Eastern Front. The 24th Separate Assault Battalion Eider, under the leadership of Ukrainian commander Anatoly Shtyfin, carried out the attack and destroyed approximately 20 invaders, including the Russian brigade commander, chief of staff, and one of their assistants. Images depicting the battalion's combat operations were published in a Telegram group. The battle took place between the settlements of Ivanovskaya and Kishka, with Kishka strategically located 5 kilometers south of Bakhmut. The village served as a critical point of defense, protecting both the approaches to the city and the route from Kostyantynivka, which supplies the Ukrainian garrison. Additionally, it has been reported that Major General Sergei Goryachev, a Russian career soldier and chief of staff of the 35th United Arms Army, was killed in combat in the Zaporizhia region on Monday, June 12. The Ukrainian counterattack resulted in his elimination. The scale of this war is staggering. General Christopher Cavoli, NATO's commander of joint forces in Europe, has reported that over 200,000 Russian soldiers and more than 1,800 officers have been killed or wounded since the large-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022. Cavoli emphasizes the need for NATO to adapt to this new reality, stating that if someone attacks with a tank, you should respond with a tank as well. However, the accuracy of weapons and the production capacity of the defense industry are also crucial factors determining success. Ukrainian forces have achieved some success in various regions, such as Novo, Danilovka, Robertino, Mala, Tokmak, Willow-Vilna Pul-Makarovka, and they are consolidating their positions in these areas. Russian troops, on the other hand, are primarily focused on defense and attempting to block the advancement of Ukrainian forces. The invaders are utilizing reserves to recapture lost positions. Ukrainian soldiers continue to repel the offensive of Russian troops in the Lyman and Bakhmut directions. Fierce clashes persist, especially in the Yan Polivka and Serebryansk forest areas in the Donetsk region. Offensive actions have also been partially successful in the Belokorica-Shipka direction. In recent days, Ukrainian defenders have successfully repelled enemy attacks as the Russian invaders gain speed in the Lyman-Kupiansk direction. Meanwhile, the Russian army is preparing a large-scale evacuation in the temporarily occupied Henichesk, Kherson region. This suggests that while the Ukrainian army advances, the Russian army is preparing to retreat from the occupied territories. Propagandist Olga Skabeva has drawn parallels between the attacks, causing increased concern. Of particular note is the recent attack on the Chongar Bridge, which effectively cut off 70% of military and civilian traffic from the Russian Federation to the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts, as well as the transportation of approximately 80% of Russian ammunition. The Russian command seems unable to compensate for these losses in artillery, even with the replacement of old Soviet howitzers. The Russian occupation army is actively spreading information about evacuation, causing panic among collaborators. SMS messages containing evacuation coordinates and detailed instructions are being sent to their mobile phones. The heavy casualties suffered by Russian forces in Ukrainian attacks have forced Russia to resort to more costly and dangerous tactics, including the use of helicopters. However, this approach poses a significant problem for Moscow, as the Russian command is struggling to compensate for the loss of artillery even by replacing the outdated howitzers. The attacks carried out by the Ukrainian armed forces on Crimea almost gave the Ukrainian partisan groups an opportunity to carry out a sabotage action. Because if you remember, the Ukrainian armed forces targeted the city of Saki, which is home to one of the largest air bases in Crimea, before the Ukrainian partisans sabotaged Simferopol. Thanks to the airstrikes they carried out in the city, the Ukrainian forces gathered the attention in the city of Saki on the peninsula. And in this time period, the Ukrainian partisan groups had already made all their preparations. The successive attacks of both the Ukrainian armed forces and Ukrainian partisan groups confused the Russian authorities on the peninsula. In short, partisan groups continued to take an active role in the Crimean Peninsula so that Ukraine could regain its freedom. Now, without wasting any time, let's move on to the striking details of the sabotage actions of the Ukrainian partisans against Simferopol, who struck the final blow after the attacks of the Ukrainian armed forces on the Saki airbase. Recently, an unknown explosion occurred in the natural gas pipeline in Simferopol. Unidentified persons blew up a gas pipeline. This unidentified group is presumed to be Ukrainian partisans. The explosion occurred at the location of the gas valve unit near Balaklavsky Street in the evening. According to preliminary calculations, an unidentified person placed an explosive with a capacity of about 200 grams of TNT in the area where the gas valve is located. This person's preparations and placing the explosive near the gas valve did not even go unnoticed by the residents of Simferopol. The unidentified freedom fighter had worked so hard that he planted the explosive without anyone noticing and fled the scene. The 200 grams of TNT placed in the gas valve exploded violently after a short time while the people in the vicinity began to flee. After the explosion, the unidentified person who placed the TNT on the gas valve was never found after a long search. Shortly after the explosion, a safety device was urgently taken at the scene. It also caused extensive damage to the TNT gas pipes placed near the gas valve. However, the Russian authorities on the peninsula reported that the gas valve and pipes were not damaged too much, so that the sabotage action in Simferopol would not make too much noise, and that the natural gas flow still continues. Yes, 200 grams of TNT explosive would not have completely disabled the natural gas system. But still, it was not very convincing to say that there was no damage. Currently, it's estimated that the unidentified person who planted the TNT carried out the sabotage action only to distract attention on the peninsula, not to completely disable the natural gas system. It is estimated that not a single person carried out the sabotage action that took place in Simferopol, and that there were also people who helped this person. There was no clear explanation from the Russians on this issue, but the officials in the peninsula think that the sabotage was carried out by Ukrainian partisan groups. The Kiev government continues to keep its silence on the issue. Ukrainians usually celebrate these victories after such attacks, but for the most part, they do not take responsibility for attacks and sabotage actions. Ukrainian partisan groups, on the other hand, take action and manage to disperse the entire focal point on the peninsula. The partisans who took action for the freedom of Ukrainians continued to be the secret heroes of the war. Ukrainian partisans can even play a critical role in changing the course of the war by carrying out active, offensive actions, especially on the southern front lines of Ukraine and on the Crimean Peninsula. Ukrainian partisans provide not only operational but also intelligence data to Kiev, but the offensive actions of these freedom groups make much more noise. The striking sabotage actions that took place here were both the Russian authorities and the residents of the peninsula, and greatly escalate the tension in the peninsula. The attacks carried out by Ukrainian partisans on Simferopol in Crimea in the past few days succeeded in raising the tension in the peninsula to its peak. In addition, the fact that the Ukrainian forces targeted Crimea again right after Putin's visit to Crimea was a very tragic situation for the Russians, especially for Putin. Now let's move on to the details of the striking attack that took place a few days after the Russian leader's visit to Crimea. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine recently announced that in the north of Crimea, Russian cruise missiles transported by rail were destroyed. Ukrainian intelligence announced that the missiles destroyed in the explosions were Russian-caliber cruise missiles intended for use by Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Caliber missiles have been widely used in attacks on Ukrainian cities and infrastructure in recent months. It was foreseen that these missiles would also be used in civilian Russian attacks. The Russian-appointed governor of Tsankawi stated that the attack was carried out with armed drones. Speaking to Ukrainian TV, a city resident stated in the yet unconfirmed report that the explosions, which lasted for 30 minutes, left some of Tsankawi without electricity. In addition, Tungoy Governor Igor Ivan stated that a person was injured and hospitalized due to the shrapnel from a downed UAV. Ivan, who did not share information about whether any military targets were damaged or not, said in a statement to the local media that fires broke out in many houses and energy grids were damaged. Russian investigators, on the other hand, reported that a residence unit and shop were damaged and all targets were civilian, according to preliminary findings. Sergei Aksyonov, the highest Russian official in Crimea, announced that the air defense near Tsankawi has been activated and the situation is under control. The city is used as a railway hub between Crimea and other parts of occupied Ukraine. In the news on Russian television channels, it was stated that the attack did not cause any damage to the railway infrastructure. There are many such examples. In other words, Ukrainian partisans carried out numerous sabotage acts as a distraction, especially in the Crimean Peninsula. Many of these acts of sabotage were downplayed by the Russian authorities on the peninsula, and it was claimed that the attack attempts were not very effective. But when you look at the current situation, the intelligence data provided by the Ukrainian partisans to the Ukrainian armed forces and their offensive actions are bringing Kiev one step closer to the Great Crimean Plan day by day. Incredible moves by Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. Harsh reactions came from the Baltic countries, which responded to Russia's threats with threats. After the developments, these three countries made incredible at Ukraine. Putin lashed out at the Estonian government. The Lithuanian Prime Minister stated that if the threats are not withdrawn, the aid will increase even more. The whole world agenda was shaken by this tension. The plans of the Russian government continued to come to light one by one. The revelation that Vladimir Putin himself has announced that the borders of the invasions will exceed Ukraine has shaken the agenda. Fearing such threats, many countries have been silent about the war for a long time, fearing that a Russian invasion of Ukrainian territory would threaten their own countries. They have adopted a policy of neutrality. Even when these countries send aid, they do so in the strictest secrecy. They do not want Putin, who recklessly challenges even the most powerful countries, to turn his radars on them. But the Baltic states have not adopted this neutral stance and have not hesitated to openly show their loyalty to Ukraine. They have also continued to send aid to Ukraine, despite the fear that if Ukraine were to be invaded, the Baltic states would be next in line. Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, on the other hand, have been remarkable in their stance in recent days, stating that they are firmly opposed to Vladimir Putin's unjust invasions. They have announced that they are taking every precaution against any attempt at invasion. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, which are fence their borders with barbed wire, have also installed air defense systems all over the country. The Baltic states, which have deployed many times more troops than necessary, have also taken every precaution against attacks from the sea. Ukraine's other allies have also been asked to help. It is known that many technology giant countries which have made it their main goal to prevent Russia from achieving its ambitions have agreed to send this out. As a result, it can be clearly seen that the whole world is united against Russia. Countries continue to provide aid to prevent Russia from invading Ukraine and moving on to other countries. Countries that do not spare any help. They can have increased their support even more these days as Ukraine marches towards victory. Many countries, such as NATO, are providing Ukraine with the highest level of technology in this war. That has turned into a technology war. When the incredible struggle of the Ukrainian army is added to the site, many conflicts, and in victory. Many countries are very pleased to see that the aid they have provided to Ukraine is being utilized in the best way possible. It is also a source of great pride for these countries to see how strong Ukraine has become from the difficult situation it was in at the beginning of the war. The Kharkiv region is known as one of the easiest victories for the Russian army. The main reason for this is the proximity of the region to Russia. Because of this proximity, the Russian army is able to send much more equipment to the region than other regions. They also have the chance to intervene directly in any attempt to attack the region. For this reason, the Ukrainian army had not attacked the Kharkiv region for a long time, allowing Russian soldiers to gain full control in the region. However, the Ukrainian army, which became stronger over time, also had some plans for this region. Russia, which did not doubt the security of the region, certainly did not expect such an attack. The Ukrainian army wanted to regain its territory by organizing a major offensive in Kharkiv, trying to gather enough forces for this. The Ukrainian army requested help from many countries after these countries approved Ukraine's request. The Ukrainian army devised a clever plan for the Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian army first decided to capture the villages that make up the small areas around the region, knowing that with the capture of these villages, the superiority in the region would gradually pass to them. Ukrainian commanders enter these villages with the ammunition. They obtained the ammunition from Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia was of incredible importance in capturing these villages. The Ukrainian army first identified the headquarters of the Russian army. All the defense systems of this headquarters and how they could be broken were learned, and an attack plan was created according to these needs. The Ukrainian army, which left no margin for error in the operation, aimed to shock the Russian soldiers in the headquarters. The Ukrainian army, which carried out its plans with utmost secrecy, made a great effort to prevent Russian intelligence from obtaining any information on this issue. The flags on the vehicles of the Ukrainian army, which used armored vehicles obtained from America in this operation, shocked the whole world. These armored vehicles with Latvian, Lithuanian, and Estonian flags on them proved that these countries were also involved in the hot war. These countries had sent armored vehicles purchased from America for this operation that could cause great damage to the Russian army. Russian soldiers who sold these armored vehicles, which were many times more powerful than the Ukrainian army's own armored vehicles, were shocked. The Ukrainian army advancing towards the headquarters in this way almost blockaded the headquarters. The Ukrainian army, which opened fire from all sides, also managed to shock the Russian soldiers driven by the explosions. The Russian soldiers fled the headquarters and rose up to save their lives. But when they came out, the sight they saw did not look good for the Russian soldiers. Seeing that the entire headquarters was surrounded, the Russian troops realized that they had no choice but to surrender. The armored vehicles belonging to the Russian army were also blown up, and the Russian soldiers were forced to submit to the Ukrainian army's power in the region. The Ukrainian army neutralized the soldiers who tried to enter the conflict and arrested the surrender to Russian soldiers for interrogation. With this victory, Ukraine had gained much more than meets the eye in this operation, which was an incredible step for its dominance in the Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian army also managed to avoid any damage. However, it was also known that the Russian army would launch attacks to recapture this village so close to the Russian border. The Ukrainian army, which did not want to fall into the trap of the Russian army by being caught and prepared for these attacks, had taken all necessary measures in the region. Ukraine, which kept its defense systems active in the region, also ensured that many soldiers were dispatched to the region. Determined to hold on to its victory, the Ukrainian army took all measures to ensure that Russian soldiers did not dare to enter this region. In this way, after making sure of the security of the region, the new operation would start to be planned to move to other regions. Ukraine was cleverly planning to move towards the interior of the strategically important Kharkiv region. The Ukrainian army planned to surround and blockade the region and gradually move in. In this way, it is certain that the Ukrainian army, which plans to leave no escape point for Russian troops, will fulfill its goals if it advances in this way. In addition to all this, many ammunition belongs to Ukraine. Russian soldiers were also transferred to the Ukrainian army in this operation. The army, which received almost no damage, on the contrary, gained many ammunition with this operation. Russian soldiers, on the other hand, faced the danger of being shot with their own weapons in another region. The statements of the captured soldiers shocked the whole world. The soldiers explained that they no longer had any of the means that they had at the beginning of the war. According to the soldiers, Russia had exhausted all its power very quickly. For this reason, the soldiers were unable to protect themselves in the threatened areas.